Michelle Brown had imagined this evening 1,000 different ways, but betrayal wasn't one of them. The Hampton estate loomed before her like something from a Gothic novel, all stone columns and manicured hedges that screamed old money. She'd been here dozens of times over the past 2 years, but tonight felt different. The windows glowed with warm light, yet something cold twisted in her stomach as she walked up the marble steps. 3 days until she became Mrs. Matthew Hampton, and she was so deliriously happy she could barely sleep anymore. The heavy oak door swung open before she could knock. Matt stood there in a crisp white shirt, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. That should have been her first warning. "Hey, beautiful," he said, kissing her cheek. His lips felt mechanical. "Is everything okay?" Michelle touched his face, searching for the man who usually lit up when she arrived. "Everything's fine. Mom and Dad want to have dinner with us. Just family stuff before the wedding." Family stuff. The words should have comforted her. Instead, they landed like stones in her chest. The dining room was set for 5, not the intimate dinner for 2 Matt had promised. Richard Hampton sat at the head of the table like a king surveying his kingdom, his silver hair perfectly styled. Diane Hampton perched beside him, dripping in pearls, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval that Michelle had learned to ignore. But tonight, there was a 5th person, a man in an expensive suit Michelle didn't recognize, with a leather briefcase sitting ominously on the empty chair beside him. "Michelle, darling," Diane said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "So glad you could join us. Please, sit." Michelle glanced at Matt, who wouldn't meet her eyes. Warning bells screamed in her head, but she sat, folding her hands in her lap, the way her mother had taught her before she died. Grace under pressure. Always grace. "I believe we can skip the pleasantries," Richard said, not bothering with hello. "This is Gerald Thornton, our family attorney. We've asked him here tonight to discuss a rather important matter before the wedding proceeds, like their marriage was a business transaction pending approval." "Dad, maybe we should," Matt started, but Richard silenced him with a look that could freeze fire. Gerald opened his briefcase with a soft click that echoed in the suddenly suffocating room. He withdrew a document so thick it made a sound when he dropped it on the table in front of Michelle. "This is a prenuptial agreement," Gerald said in the bored tone of someone who'd done this 100 times before. "Standard protection for the Hampton assets in the event of divorce. We'll need your signature on every page by the end of this evening." Michelle stared at the document like it was a coiled snake. She could see how thick it was, page after page of legal text. "I don't understand," she said quietly, though she understood perfectly. "We never discussed this." "Of course we didn't discuss it," Diane said, setting down her wine glass with deliberate precision. "Because girls like you don't discuss these things. You wait until you're locked in, and then the real you comes out." The temperature in the room plummeted. Michelle's hands went numb. "Excuse me?" "Oh, don't play naive, darling. It's insulting to everyone's intelligence." Diane leaned forward, her eyes sharp as broken glass. "We know exactly what you are. We've seen your type circle our family for decades. Different faces, same hunger. You look at my son and see dollar signs, not love. You see security, not partnership. You see a meal ticket, not a marriage." Each word was a knife, precisely placed. Michelle felt them all land. "That's not true," Michelle whispered, her voice barely audible. "I love Matt. I've always loved Matt." "Love?" Richard laughed, the sound bitter and cruel. "How convenient that this love appeared right after you learned about our family's worth. How romantic that your affection bloomed when Matt mentioned his trust fund." "I never asked about his money, not once." "Because you're smarter than that," Diane said. "You played the long game. The sweet, simple girl who doesn't care about wealth, who lives in that pathetic little apartment and cooks dinner on a hot plate. Very convincing, I'll give you that. But we weren't born yesterday, sweetheart." Michelle turned to Matt, silently begging him to say something, to defend her, to tell his parents they were wrong. He sat frozen, his jaw clenched, staring at his untouched plate. "Matt?" Her voice cracked on his name. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his father. said nothing. That silence was worse than every cruel word his parents had thrown at her. "The prenup is non-negotiable," Gerald said, apparently deciding the emotional carnage was sufficient foreplay for the business at hand. "You'll retain nothing in the event of divorce. No property, no alimony, no stake in Hampton Industries. You leave exactly as you came, with nothing." "This is insane," Michelle said, standing so abruptly her chair scraped against the floor. "Matt, tell them this is insane." Matt finally looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes broke something fundamental inside her chest. Not love, not conviction, just fear. Fear of his parents, fear of conflict, fear that meant he'd choose them over her without a fight. "Baby, just—" He reached for her hand. She jerked away. "Just sign it so we can move past this. It doesn't mean anything. We're not going to get divorced." "Then why does it exist?" "It's just a formality. A piece of paper." "Why are you making this difficult?" Why was she making this difficult? He'd actually said those words. Like she was the problem. Like she was unreasonable for not wanting to sign away her dignity along with any legal rights. "You want me to sign a document that says I'm a gold digger," Michelle said slowly, articulating each word with painful clarity. "You want me to put my name on a legal contract that presumes I'm marrying you for money. And you think that's just a formality? Michelle, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable." Her voice rose for the first time, and she watched Matt flinch. "Good. Let him flinch. I'm the only person in this room being reasonable. I fell in love with a man who made me laugh, who brought me coffee in bed and sang off-key in the shower, who talked about building a life together, not protecting assets. I thought I was marrying a partner, not auditioning to be the hired help." "How dare you raise your voice in this house?" Diane said, standing now, her face flushed with anger. "We have been nothing but gracious to you, and this is how you respond, with hysteria and drama?" "Gracious?" Michelle laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to draw blood. "You've tolerated me. There's a difference. You've smiled through gritted teeth at every dinner, every holiday, every moment you've been forced to acknowledge my existence. I tried so hard to make you like me, to be enough for you, but I finally understand. I was never going to be enough, because you don't measure worth in character or kindness or love. You measure it in bank statements and family trees and whatever other arbitrary bullshit rich people use to decide who deserves basic human decency." "Sign the prenup or there is no wedding," Richard said, his voice cold and final. "Those are your options. Choose." Michelle picked up the document with shaking hands. She read the first page, her eyes scanning words that reduced their love to clauses and contingencies. Then she set it down, carefully aligned it with the edge of the table, and looked directly at Diane Hampton. "Keep your prenup," Michelle said, her voice eerily calm now, all the fury compressed into something dense and dangerous. "Keep your money and your estate and your precious family legacy. You're going to need all of it." She turned to leave, but Richard's voice stopped her. "Is that a threat?" Michelle looked back over her shoulder, and her smile was the saddest, coldest thing Matt had ever seen. "No, Mr. Hampton, it's a promise. You're about to learn the most expensive lesson of your lives." She walked toward the door, each step echoing in the terrible silence. Matt jumped up, his chair clattering backward. "Michelle, wait, please." He caught her in the driveway, grabbing her arm. She spun to face him, and the tears streaming down her face made him want to die. "Don't touch me. Baby, please, I love you. I love you so much. Just sign the stupid paper and we can forget this whole nightmare happened." "You love me." She said it like she was testing the words, seeing if they still meant anything. "You love me, but you sat there silent while they called me a gold digger. You love me, but you want me to sign a contract that says I'm not trustworthy. You love me, but when they asked you to choose, you chose them." "I didn't choose them." "Yes, Matt, you did. Your silence chose them. Your compliance chose them. Your fear of disappointing mommy and daddy chose them. And that's fine. That's your choice to make. But don't you dare tell me you love me while you're asking me to accept being treated like garbage." "I'm not asking you to—" "You just chose them," Michelle said, pulling her arm free. "Remember that. When everything falls apart, remember that this was your choice, not mine. She got in her car and started the engine. Matt stood in the driveway, illuminated by headlights that made him look like a stranger. Michelle drove away, watching him shrink in her rearview mirror until he disappeared completely. Behind her, she heard Diane's voice carry across the manicured lawn. She'll come crawling back. They always do. Michelle's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Her engagement ring caught the light from passing street lamps, sending fractured rainbows across the dashboard. She'd loved him with every fiber of her being, and he'd broken her heart without even trying to fight for her. But Michelle Brown had learned a long time ago that heartbreak didn't kill you. It just showed you who you really were when the pretty illusions shattered. And the Hamptons were about to discover exactly who Michelle Brown was. Chapter 2. The Reckoning. Michelle didn't go home that night because home was the apartment where Matt had a drawer full of clothes and a toothbrush by the sink and a coffee mug with his name on it that she'd bought as a joke. Instead, she drove to her penthouse across town, the one nobody knew about. Not Matt, not his parents, not even her closest friends. It was the place she'd bought after her parents died, when the lawyers finally finished untangling the web of trusts and holdings and revealed that Michelle Brown wasn't just wealthy, she was the kind of wealthy that whispered instead of shouted. The penthouse was minimalist, almost stark. White walls, simple furniture, nothing that screamed money. She'd never believed in flaunting what she had. Her parents had taught her that wealth was a responsibility, not a trophy. That true value came from what you built, not what you inherited. That's why Matt had been different. He'd never asked about her family, never questioned why she lived so modestly when she had a degree from an elite university. He'd just loved her, or so she'd thought, for the woman who burned pasta and laughed too loud at his terrible jokes and made him feel like himself instead of Richard Hampton's heir. Except tonight proved she'd been living in a fantasy. Michelle stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, still wearing the dress she'd chosen so carefully for what was supposed to be a celebration. Her phone vibrated, Matt calling. She watched it ring until it went to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. By dawn, she'd stopped counting. She blocked his number as the sun rose over the skyline. Then Michelle Brown did what she'd learned to do when the world tried to break her. She fought back. She made 3 phone calls before most people finished their first cup of coffee. The conversations were brief, professional, devastating in their simplicity. "This is Michelle Brown. I'm exercising the termination clause. I understand the terms. Yes, I'm certain. Thank you." 3 times, 3 companies, 3 contracts that represented the lifeblood of Hampton Industries. By lunch, the market had noticed. By evening, Hampton Industries' stock had dropped, not catastrophically, but enough to make Richard's phone ring with increasingly panicked calls from board members who wanted to know what the hell was happening. Michelle didn't celebrate. She sat in her penthouse apartment with a glass of wine she didn't drink, staring at her engagement ring like it was evidence of a crime. The diamond caught the light, beautiful and meaningless. She should take it off. Should throw it in a drawer or mail it back to Matt with a note that said all the things she didn't have the energy to say. Instead, she just sat there, feeling the weight of it, remembering how Matt had proposed on the beach at sunset, dropping to one knee in the sand, telling her she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Maybe she had been, past tense, before his parents reminded him where his loyalties actually lay. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, then saw the preview. "Michelle, please. I know you blocked me. I'm using someone's phone. Please talk to me." She deleted it without reading the rest. Another text came through, then another. Matt was relentless when he wanted something. It was one of the qualities she'd admired about him. His determination, his refusal to give up. Funny how quickly admirable qualities could become unbearable. The building concierge called up around midnight. "Miss Brown, there's a gentleman here who insists he needs to see you, Matthew Hampton. He says it's an emergency. Tell him I'm not available." "He's quite insistent, Miss Brown. He says he'll wait." "Then he'll be waiting a long time. Please inform security that Mr. Hampton is not to be admitted under any circumstances." Michelle hung up and walked to the window. From her vantage point, she could just barely see the building entrance far below. Matt was down there somewhere, probably pacing the marble lobby, running his hands through his hair the way he did when he was stressed. She watched for a while, then closed the curtains. Let him wait. Let him feel a fraction of the abandonment she'd felt sitting at that dinner table while he chose silence over defending her. Across town, in the Hampton Industries boardroom, Richard was experiencing his own hell. The emergency meeting had stretched past midnight, board members demanding answers for why their 3 largest contracts had suddenly evaporated. "It's Brown Capital Holdings," his CFO said, exhaustion making his voice flat. "They're behind all 3 terminations. The holding company is buried under layers of shell corporations, but I finally traced it back." "Who the hell is Brown Capital Holdings?" Richard demanded. "And why are they targeting us?" The CFO slid a folder across the polished table. "That's the interesting part. Brown Capital Holdings is privately held, no public filings, extremely secretive. But I called in some favors." "And?" "The company is controlled by a family trust. The sole beneficiary is Michelle Brown." The room went silent. Someone coughed. A chair creaked. Richard stared at the folder like it contained photos of his own death. "That's impossible," he said, but his voice cracked. "She's nobody. She lives in a tiny apartment. She works some non-profit job. There's no way." "Sir, with respect, there's every way." The CFO opened the folder. "Michelle Brown is the daughter of Jonathan and Alicia Brown, who died in a sailing accident. They left her everything, controlling interests in multiple companies, substantial real estate holdings, liquid assets in the hundreds of millions. She's been managing it all quietly through trustees." Richard thought he might vomit. "How much?" "Conservatively, $500 million. The family keeps their wealth very private." Diane, who'd been sitting frozen throughout the presentation, made a sound like a wounded animal. She actually put her hand over her mouth and ran from the room. Richard heard her retching in the hallway bathroom. $500 million. They'd called her a gold digger. They'd shoved a prenup in her face to protect their assets. They'd accused her of hunting their son for his money, and she'd been worth more than his entire family fortune the whole time. "Get out," Richard said hoarsely. "All of you. Meeting adjourned." The board members fled, leaving Richard alone with the financial profile of the woman he'd destroyed. Michelle stared at him from the photograph clipped to the file. Professional headshot, probably from some charity board she sat on, her smile warm and genuine. He'd seen that smile across his dinner table dozens of times. She'd tried so hard to please him, to make conversation, to be accepted, and he'd treated her like an unwanted pest. When Diane returned, mascara streaked down her face. Richard was still sitting in the dark boardroom. "What have we done?" she whispered. "We insulted royalty," Richard said. "We called her a gold digger when she was probably doing charity work with her free time. We accused her of hunting our money when she could buy us over and over. We destroyed our son's happiness because we were too arrogant to see what was right in front of us. Can we fix this? Can we apologize? To Michelle? No. We burned that bridge and danced on the ashes." Richard rubbed his face, suddenly looking ancient. "But maybe we can talk to Matt. Make him understand." "Understand what? That we destroyed his relationship? That we judged the woman he loved by her bank account and found her wanting, only to discover we were the ones who were worthless?" Diane shook her head. "He'll never forgive us, and he shouldn't." She was right, and they both knew it. In his friend's apartment, Matt sat on a borrowed couch, staring at his phone. He'd been calling, texting, trying every method of contact he could think of. Michelle had blocked him on everything. He'd gone to her apartment building, but security wouldn't let him up. Where was she? Was she safe? Was she crying the way he'd been crying since she drove away? His phone finally rang, and Matt lunged for it, hope surging through his chest. But it was his father's number. "Matt, we need to talk. It's about Michelle. I don't want to hear her name come out of your mouth ever again. Son, listen to me. We made a mistake, a catastrophic mistake. Michelle isn't who we thought she was. I know who she is. She's kind and funny, and she makes me want to be better than I am. She's the woman I love, and you drove her away." "Matt," his father's voice cracked, "she's worth $500 million. Her family trust controls the 3 companies that just terminated our contracts. She's not a gold digger. She never was. She's one of the wealthiest women in the country, and we treated her like trash." Matt dropped the phone. It clattered on the hardwood floor, his father's voice still coming through the speaker, but Matt couldn't hear any more. The world had narrowed to a single devastating realization. Michelle had loved him for 2 years. 2 years of her making him laugh, supporting his dreams, listening to his fears. 2 years of her never once mentioning money or asking for anything except his time and his heart. She'd cook dinner in her tiny kitchen because she enjoyed it, not because she couldn't afford restaurants. She'd driven her old car because she didn't care about impressing people. She'd been herself, completely, authentically herself, while he'd been the poor little rich boy who couldn't stand up to his parents. And when they'd humiliated her, he'd asked her to just sign the prenup, to stop being difficult. Matt grabbed his keys and ran for the door. He had to see her, had to apologize, had to make her understand that he was an idiot. But he loved her, and they could fix this. But when he reached her apartment building, the doorman stopped him. "I'm sorry, sir. Miss Brown has left instructions. You're not to be admitted." "Please, I just need 5 minutes. 5 minutes to explain." "Sir, I have my orders. If you continue to insist, I'll have to call the police." Matt sat down on the curb as light rain began to fall, staring up at the windows he knew so well. Was she up there? Could she see him? He stayed there until sunrise, soaked and shivering, but Michelle never came down. 20 floors above him, Michelle stood at her window, watching. She could see him sitting there, hunched and broken, and part of her wanted to run down and forgive him and pretend none of this had happened. But the larger part, the part that still felt his silence like a wound, knew she deserved better than a man who loved her conditionally. She closed the curtains and walked away. Chapter 3. The Empire Crumbles. Morning came to the Hampton estate like an unwanted guest, cold and unforgiving. Richard hadn't slept. He'd spent the entire night in his study, going through every document his investigator had compiled on Michelle Brown, and each page made him feel sicker than the last. Michelle at a hospital charity gala, presenting a check for a new children's wing. Michelle on the board of 3 non-profit organizations, Michelle's anonymous donations funding scholarships, Michelle's family foundation supporting arts programs, homeless shelters, cancer research. She'd been doing all of this while dating Matt, while having dinner at their table, while enduring Diane's thinly veiled insults about her modest lifestyle. She'd never said a word about any of it. The investigator had done thorough work. There were photos of Michelle with senators, tech CEOs, old money families whose names appeared in history books. She moved in circles that made the Hamptons look like new money pretenders, but in all the photos, Michelle looked uncomfortable with the attention, often positioned at the edges of group shots, smiling politely but not warmly. The only photos where she looked truly happy were candid shots pulled from social media. Michelle at a community center reading to children, Michelle at a soup kitchen serving meals, Michelle at a park playing with someone's dog, and then there were the photos with Matt. Richard found these the hardest to look at. Michelle gazing at his son like he'd hung the moon, Michelle laughing at something Matt said, her whole face lit up with joy. Michelle and Matt at what looked like a street fair, sharing cotton candy, looking at each other the way people in love look at each other. Real love, not calculated, not strategic, just pure, honest affection. Richard closed the folder and walked to Matt's childhood bedroom. His son was there, home after being denied entry to Michelle's building. Matt sat on his bed, still wearing yesterday's rain-soaked clothes, staring at nothing. "Son, we need to talk." "Go away." "Matthew, please, go away." Matt's voice broke. "You've done enough. You and Mom have done more than enough." Richard sat anyway, uninvited. "I brought the file. The investigator's report on Michelle. You should see it." "I don't need to see anything. I know who Michelle is. I've known for 2 years. She's brilliant and kind, and she makes the world better just by existing in it. She's patient and funny, and she listens when I talk about things that don't matter. She remembers my coffee order, and she texts me pictures of dogs she sees on the street because she knows they make me smile. Matt's voice was raw, destroyed. She's the best person I've ever known, and I sat there and watched you destroy her, and I didn't say a single word to stop you. She's also worth more money than our entire family has ever had. Matt looked at his father, and his eyes were empty. I don't care. You should care. We accused her of being a gold digger, Matt. We made her sign a prenup to protect our assets, and all the while she could have bought Hampton Industries without blinking. Do you understand how catastrophically we misjudged her? I understand that you judge everyone by their bank account. Matt stood, pacing like a caged animal. That's the problem. You couldn't see that she was good because you were too busy calculating her net worth. You couldn't accept that someone might love me for who I am instead of what I have, because that's how you've lived your entire life, measuring worth in dollars and judging everyone by what they can do for you. That's not fair, isn't it? Name one friend you have who couldn't do something for your business. Name one relationship you've maintained that doesn't serve some strategic purpose. You've taught me my whole life that everything is transactional, and I believed you because I didn't know any different. But then I met Michelle, and she didn't want anything from me except my time. She never asked about money or my family or what I could give her. She just wanted to know who I was when all the other stuff was stripped away. Richard felt something crack in his chest. We were trying to protect you. From what? From love? From happiness? From the first real relationship I've ever had? Matt laughed bitterly. Congratulations, Dad. Mission accomplished. You protected me right into complete misery. Diane appeared in the doorway, looking small and fragile in her silk robe. Matthew, please. We made a mistake. We're admitting that. Can't we just move forward? Move forward? Matt turned to his mother, and she flinched at what she saw in his face. You called the woman I love a gold digger. You accused her of hunting me for money. You forced me to choose between you and her, and I chose you because I was too weak to stand up for what mattered. And now you want to move forward? We could call her, Diane said desperately. Apologize. Maybe if we explained... Explained what? That you're sorry you misjudged her financial situation? That you'd be fine with her marrying me now that you know she doesn't need our money? Do you really think that's better? The silence that followed was damning. That's what I thought, Matt said quietly. You're not sorry you hurt her. You're sorry she turned out to be rich. There's a difference, and Michelle is smart enough to know it. Richard stood, trying to salvage something from this disaster. The company is in trouble. Those terminated contracts, she can destroy us if she wants to. We need you to talk to her, to smooth things over. No. Matt, be reasonable. I said no. I'm not going to use whatever feelings she might have left for me to save your company. I'm not going to manipulate her into forgiving us because you're facing consequences for your cruelty. That's exactly the kind of transactional bullshit that got us into this mess. Then what do you suggest? Richard's voice rose, frustration finally breaking through. Should we just watch everything we've built crumble? Lose our contracts, our reputation, our standing, all because we made one mistake? One mistake? Matt's laugh was sharp enough to draw blood. You've made the same mistake my entire life. You valued money over people, status over substance, appearance over reality. This isn't one mistake. This is who you are, and I'm done being part of it. What does that mean? It means I'm leaving. I'll pack my things and be out by tonight. Diane gasped. You're choosing her over us after everything we've done for you? I'm not choosing her. She doesn't want me anymore, and I don't blame her. Matt's voice went soft, defeated. I'm choosing myself, the version of me that Michelle saw, the man I could be if I wasn't constantly trying to meet your impossible standards. If you walk out that door, you're cut off, Richard said, and he hated how the threat sounded. Empty and desperate. No trust fund, no position at the company, no financial support of any kind. Matt met his father's eyes, and Richard saw his son clearly for the first time in years. Not the obedient boy who'd followed every instruction, not the heir apparent who'd never questioned the family's values, but a man who'd finally found something worth fighting for, even if he'd found it too late. "Good," Matt said simply. "Maybe I'll finally figure out who I am when I'm not just Richard Hampton's son." He walked past both parents, went to his room and started packing. Diane tried to follow, tried to reason with him, but Matt just kept folding clothes and filling boxes with the methodical precision of someone who'd already made up their mind. By sunset, Matthew Hampton's car was packed with everything that actually mattered to him. Some clothes, some books, a framed photo of Michelle laughing that he couldn't bear to throw away, even though looking at it felt like swallowing glass. He drove away from the estate without looking back, watching it disappear in his rearview mirror the same way Michelle had watched him disappear. The difference was that Michelle had been worth fighting for, and Matt had fought for nothing. Across town, Michelle sat in her office, the real one, on the 42nd floor of a building her family trust owned, and read through the reports her team had compiled. Hampton Industries was hemorrhaging. Their stock continued to fall. Creditors were getting nervous. Richard had spent the morning trying to secure bridge financing and been denied by every major lender. She should feel victorious, vindicated, powerful. Instead, she just felt tired. Her assistant knocked softly. "Miss Brown, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important." "Who is it?" "Matthew Hampton." Michelle's heart stopped, then started again too fast. "Tell him I'm not available." "I did. He said he'll wait however long it takes. He's been in the lobby for hours." Hours. Michelle looked at the clock. It was late afternoon. Matt had been sitting downstairs since lunch, just waiting for the chance to see her. Part of her wanted to let him wait forever, to let him feel the helplessness she'd felt sitting at that dinner table. But another part, the part that had loved him for 2 years, that still loved him even though she didn't want to, needed to know why he'd come. "Send him up," she said finally, "but tell security to stay close." When the elevator doors opened and Matt stepped into her office, Michelle almost didn't recognize him. He looked like he'd aged a decade. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt, his eyes red and exhausted. But it was the devastation in his face that made her chest ache. "Hi," he said, and his voice cracked on that single syllable. "You shouldn't be here. I know. I know you don't want to see me. I know I don't deserve your time. But I needed to tell you something, and I needed to say it to your face." Michelle stayed behind her desk, needing the barrier between them. "Say it then." Matt took a breath that seemed to hurt. "I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know sorry doesn't fix what I did, or erase how badly I hurt you. But I need you to know that my silence that night was the worst mistake of my entire life. I was a coward when you needed a warrior, and I will regret that for the rest of my existence." "Is that all?" "No." He moved closer, stopping when she tensed. "I want you to know that I'm leaving my family. Not because of the money. I just found out about your wealth this morning and I don't care about it. I'm leaving because they made me choose and I chose wrong. I chose comfort over courage. I chose their approval over your dignity. And I can't be that person anymore." Michelle felt tears threatening, but refused to let them fall. "You should go. I know about the contracts, about what you're doing to Hampton Industries." Matt's voice was steady now, clear. "I'm not here to ask you to stop. You have every right to hurt them the way they hurt you. I just needed you to know that I'm not on their side anymore. I'm not on anyone's side. I'm just trying to figure out how to be someone worthy of the love you gave me, even though I know I'll never get that chance again." "You're right," Michelle said, and her voice was ice. "You won't." Matt nodded, accepting the verdict. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "For what it's worth, loving you was the most real thing I've ever experienced, and losing you taught me what actually matters, so thank you for that, even though I know I have no right to thank you for anything." He left before she could respond, the elevator doors closing on his broken expression. Michelle stood alone in her office as the sun set over the city, watching the sky turn colors she couldn't name, feeling something fundamental shift inside her chest. She'd wanted him to hurt, wanted him to understand what he'd cost them both. Mission accomplished. So why did victory taste like ashes? Chapter 4. Exile and Consequences. Matt's new apartment was a study in how far someone could fall. The studio sat above a laundromat in a neighborhood his parents wouldn't be caught dead in. The furniture came from thrift stores and sidewalk finds. The bathroom door stuck. The kitchen consisted of a hot plate and a mini fridge that hummed like it was dying. At night, he could hear his neighbors through the thin walls, arguments, crying babies, television shows played too loud. It was perfect. For the first time in his life, Matt was living in a space that reflected his actual worth, not his family's legacy. Nobody here cared that he was a Hampton. Nobody asked about his trust fund or his connections. He was just another guy, trying to make rent. He'd taken a job at Riverside Community Center as assistant director. The salary was a fraction of what he'd been making at Hampton Industries, but the work felt real. He coached youth basketball, helped kids with homework, organized fundraisers for program supplies. The staff treated him like a colleague, not a charity case or a trust fund baby, slumming it for his resume. Matt was exhausted in a way he'd never been exhausted before, physically tired from actual work instead of mentally drained from board meetings and family politics. His hands developed calluses from moving equipment and painting walls. His back ached from playing basketball with teenagers who had endless energy. He'd never been happier or more miserable, because every moment of every day he thought about Michelle, wondered where she was, what she was doing, if she ever thought about him. He'd wake up reaching for her before remembering she was gone. He'd see something funny and grab his phone to text her before remembering she'd blocked him. He'd cook dinner and set out 2 plates before catching himself. The grief was relentless and deserved. Meanwhile, Michelle was drowning in her own kind of hell. Her best friend Kendra found her in her office at 2 in the morning, staring at financial reports she wasn't actually reading. "You're going to work yourself to death," Kendra said, setting down a coffee that Michelle didn't remember asking for. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You've lost weight. You're not sleeping. You cancelled our dinner plans 3 times this week. This isn't healthy, Michelle." "What am I supposed to do? Go home and cry, eat ice cream and watch romantic comedies? Fall apart because a man I loved turned out to be weak?" Michelle's voice cracked. "I don't get to fall apart, Kendra. I have companies to run, employees to pay, obligations to meet. I don't have the luxury of heartbreak." "Everyone has the luxury of heartbreak. It's called being human." Michelle finally looked at her friend, and Kendra saw the devastation Michelle had been hiding behind perfect makeup and designer clothes. "I thought he was different. I thought love was enough. I thought if I gave him my whole heart, he'd protect it. But he handed it to his parents and let them tear it apart while he watched. He was a coward. He was a coward," Michelle agreed. "But I was a fool. I should have known better. I should have protected myself. I should have—" "Stop!" Kendra grabbed Michelle's hands. "You loved someone. That's not foolish. That's brave. What he did, what his family did, that's on them, not you. Then why does it hurt so much? Because you gave him something real and he didn't appreciate it until it was gone. That's his loss, not yours." Michelle wanted to believe that, wanted to feel powerful and vindicated and triumphant. But mostly, she just felt lonely. She channeled her pain into her foundation, anonymously funding after-school programs, food banks, scholarships. At a charity gala one evening, a socialite made a loud comment across the room. "I heard Michelle Brown got dumped because even her money couldn't buy class." The room went silent. Everyone turned to watch Michelle's reaction. She set down her champagne, walked over with the grace of someone who'd been navigating these waters her entire life, and spoke quietly enough that everyone had to lean in to hear. "I've never bought anything in my life," Michelle said, her voice calm and deadly, "but I've learned you can't purchase courage, loyalty, or a spine. No amount of money can fix what some people lack naturally." She turned and walked away, leaving the socialite red-faced and speechless. The room erupted in applause. The socialite left in tears. but the victory felt hollow. Michelle went home to her empty penthouse and stared at her engagement ring, still sitting where she'd left it on her dresser. She should sell it, or throw it away, or mail it back to Matt with a note that said everything she couldn't say to his face. Instead, she just looked at it, remembering when love felt simple and possible and real. Across town, Matt was having his own revelation. He'd been at Riverside for weeks now, and the kids had started to trust him. They'd ask him for advice, tell him about their problems, treat him like someone who mattered not because of who his family was, but because of who he chose to be. One afternoon, a 15-year-old named Deshawn stayed after basketball practice. "Coach Matt, can I ask you something?" "Of course, man, what's up?" "My mom says you used to be rich, like really rich, but you gave it all up. Why would you do that?" Matt sat down on the bleachers, thinking about how to answer. "I didn't give it up. I traded it for something more valuable." "What's more valuable than money?" "Knowing who you actually are. When I was rich, I never knew if people liked me or liked what I could do for them. I never knew if my choices were really mine or just what everyone expected. I was playing a role instead of living a life." "You miss it though, right? The money?" Matt thought about the estate, the luxury cars, the vacation homes, the restaurants where his family had standing reservations. Then he thought about the kids at the center, the staff who'd become friends, the satisfaction of doing actual work instead of just managing investments. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I don't miss the person I was when I had it. And I'd rather be broke and real than rich and fake." Deshawn nodded slowly, processing. "My mom also said you did it because of a girl. That true?" "Yeah, that's true." "You get her back?" "No. I hurt her really badly, and she's too smart to give me another chance." "That sucks, Coach." "It really does, Deshawn. It really does." That night, Matt lay in his lumpy second-hand bed and thought about Michelle. Wondered if she was still angry, still hurt, still thinking about him at all. He hoped she'd moved on, hoped she'd found someone who would fight for her the way he should have fought, hoped she was happy. He also hoped she remembered him sometimes, not with anger or bitterness, but with the same bittersweet nostalgia he felt when he thought about their time together, the good parts, before he ruined everything. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Matt almost ignored it, then saw the message preview. "This is Richard Hampton. Your mother is in the hospital. Heart attack. She's asking for you." Matt stared at the message for a long time, feeling nothing, then something, then too much all at once. He grabbed his keys and headed for the door, knowing he was probably making a mistake, but unable to ignore the pull of obligation and old wounds and complicated love. Some bridges couldn't be burned, even when you desperately wanted to watch them go up in flames. Chapter 5. Crossing Paths. Michelle volunteered at Riverside Community Center, like she had every week for 3 years, using her middle name to stay anonymous. She'd been funding the center through her foundation since it opened, but she'd never told anyone. The work mattered more than the credit. Reading to kids, organizing donation drives, painting walls during renovation projects, these were the moments when Michelle felt most like herself, stripped of wealth and expectation and performance. This particular evening she was late. A board meeting had run over, traffic had been terrible, and she arrived frazzled in jeans and an old sweater, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She pushed through the doors and froze. Matt was standing in the gymnasium, surrounded by a group of teenagers demonstrating a basketball drill. He wore a faded center t-shirt and gym shorts, and he looked thinner than she remembered, but somehow more solid, more present, more real. Michelle's first instinct was to turn around and leave. Her second was to march over and demand to know what he was doing in her space, at her center, with her kids. Instead, she just stood there, rooted to the spot, unable to look away. Matt hadn't seen her yet. He was focused on the kids, correcting form, offering encouragement, high-fiving a boy who'd just made a difficult shot. The teenagers clearly adored him. They listened when he talked, laughed at his jokes, treated him like someone they trusted. This wasn't performance. This wasn't rich boy playing at charity. This was real work, real connection, real presence. Michelle felt something crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. Then Matt turned, and their eyes met across the gymnasium. Time stopped. The kids kept playing, kept talking, kept moving, but Matt and Michelle existed in a bubble where the world had narrowed to just the two of them and the chasm of hurt between them. Matt's face cycled through shock, hope, longing, resignation. Michelle watched it all happen in slow motion. She turned and walked toward the reading room, needing distance, needing space, needing to breathe. For 2 hours, she read to the younger children, her voice steady even though her hands shook. She could feel Matt's presence one room away, could sense him like a magnetic pull she was desperately trying to resist. When the session ended, she gathered her things quickly, planning to escape before they had to interact. But Matt was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against her car. "Please don't," Michelle said, not trusting herself to hear whatever he wanted to say. "I didn't know you volunteered here. I've been coming here for years." "I know. The staff told me. They said someone named Michelle comes every week, reads to the kids, never wants recognition. I didn't make the connection until I saw you." "Well, now you know. Move, please. I need to leave." Matt stepped aside but didn't leave. "You funded this place, didn't you? The renovation last year, the new equipment, the scholarship program, that was all you." "It doesn't matter." "It does matter. These kids, they have opportunities because of you. They have a safe place because of you. You're changing lives, Michelle. Real lives, not just writing checks and attending galas. You're actually doing the work. Why are you here, Matt? Really here, not just standing in this parking lot, but working at this center in this neighborhood when you could be anywhere else?" Matt met her eyes, and the honesty in his expression made her want to cry. "Because this is the only place I've ever felt like myself. Like I matter because of what I do, not who my family is. And because working with these kids reminds me of what you tried to teach me. That value comes from who you are, not what you have." "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Don't make me part of your redemption story. Don't turn this into some narrative where you learned and grew and became better because I broke your heart. I'm not a life lesson, Matt. I'm a person you betrayed, and you don't get to use me to feel good about your transformation." The words hit him like physical blows, and Michelle watched him absorb them. "You're right," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. That wasn't fair to you. None of this is fair to me. I know. I'll stay out of your way. I'll volunteer on different days, different times. You shouldn't have to see me when you're doing something you love." He started to walk toward his own car, and Michelle heard herself call out, "Matt, wait." He turned, hope flickering in his eyes before he could suppress it. "Is your mother okay? I heard about her heart attack." Matt looked surprised that she knew, then remembered that Michelle probably still had sources everywhere. "She's recovering. The doctors say she'll be fine. She asked me to forgive her when I visited. Said she couldn't die with the weight of what she'd done to us on her conscience." "Did you? Forgive her?" "I told her I was working on it. That forgiveness is a process, not a moment." Matt paused. "She asked about you. Wanted to know if you were okay." "What did you tell her?" "That you were brilliant and strong and exactly as okay as someone can be after being treated the way she and my father treated you. Then I told her that whether or not you were okay wasn't her business anymore." Michelle felt tears threatening. She blinked them back. "I should go." "Michelle?" "What?" "For what it's worth, seeing you tonight reminded me of everything I lost. Not the relationship, not the future we could have had, but you, the actual you, the woman who reads to kids and paints walls and changes the world quietly because the work matters more than the credit." His voice broke. "I'm so sorry I didn't fight for you. I'm so sorry I chose wrong. And I'm so sorry that sorry isn't enough." Michelle got in her car without responding, started the engine with shaking hands, and drove away, while Matt stood in the parking lot watching her taillights disappear. She made it 3 blocks before she had to pull over. The sobs came hard and fast, all the grief she'd been holding back finally breaking through her defenses. She'd loved him, God, she'd loved him so much. And seeing him tonight, seeing the man he was becoming without his family's money and influence, reminded her of why she'd fallen for him in the first place. But love wasn't enough. Love without courage was just a pretty word. And Matt had proven that when it mattered most, his love couldn't overcome his fear. Michelle cried until she had no tears left, until her throat was raw and her eyes were swollen. Then she drove home to her empty penthouse and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of loneliness pressing down on her chest. Across town, Matt sat in his small apartment and replayed the parking lot conversation over and over. He'd seen the tears in Michelle's eyes before she could hide them, seen the pain he'd caused, still fresh, still bleeding. He'd hoped that leaving his family would somehow make things better, that becoming his own person would magically fix what he'd broken. But redemption didn't work that way. Growth didn't erase the past, and Michelle deserved better than a man who'd learned to be brave only after losing her. Matt pulled out the framed photo of Michelle laughing, the one he'd kept despite knowing he should throw it away. She looked so happy in that moment, so free, so completely herself. He made a promise to that photo, to the memory of who they'd been together, to the future they'd never have. He would keep growing, keep working, keep becoming someone worthy of the love she'd given him. Not because he thought she'd ever come back, not because he expected forgiveness or redemption or a second chance, but because she'd shown him who he could be, and he owed it to himself and to her memory to actually become that person. Even if she never saw it, even if she never cared, even if he spent the rest of his life missing her, some debts couldn't be repaid, some mistakes couldn't be undone, some loves never got their second chance. Matt was learning to live with all three. Chapter 6. Blood and Redemption. 3 weeks passed before Michelle and Matt crossed paths again, and this time it wasn't in a parking lot conversation. It was in violence and blood and terror. Michelle stayed late at the center organizing donations. She'd been avoiding the place since seeing Matt, but guilt finally overcame fear. The kids needed these supplies, and her personal drama didn't matter more than their education. By the time she finished, the building was empty. The staff had gone home. The parking lot lights flickered in that unreliable way that should have warned her something was wrong. She was halfway to her car when she heard footsteps behind her. "Nice purse, lady. Nice car, too. Why don't you share?" Michelle turned to find 3 men emerging from the shadows. One held a knife that caught the streetlight. Another held a bottle. The third just cracked his knuckles in a way that suggested he didn't need a weapon. "I don't want trouble," Michelle said, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Take the purse. Take the car keys. Just leave." "Oh, we'll take those," the one with the knife said, stepping closer. "But first, let's see what else you got on you." Michelle backed toward her car, calculating distances, thinking about self-defense classes she'd taken but never thought she'd need. She was reaching for her phone when the man with the knife lunged. Then a figure appeared from nowhere, Matt, running at full speed, slamming into the attacker like a linebacker. "Get away from her!" Everything happened in nightmare slow motion, Matt fighting 3 men who clearly had experience with violence, the knife flashing, the bottle shattering, Matt blocking a blow meant for Michelle, taking a kick to the ribs that made him gasp. Michelle screamed for help, but the parking lot was empty, the street deserted. The man with the knife slashed at Matt. Matt dodged, but not fast enough. The blade caught his side, opening a line of red across his shirt. He didn't stop, didn't back down. Just kept putting himself between Michelle and the attackers, absorbing punishment, fighting with desperate determination. "Matt, stop! Just stop!" Michelle was crying now, terrified he was going to die defending her. Security finally arrived, drawn by Michelle's screams. The attackers fled, disappearing into the night. Matt collapsed against a car, blood soaking through his shirt, his breath coming in short, painful gasps. "Call an ambulance," Michelle said to security, dropping beside Matt. "Call them now!" She pressed her hands against his wound, trying to stop the bleeding, and her hands came away red. Matt looked at her, his eyes unfocused, and smiled weakly. You okay? Are you insane? Don't talk. Don't move. Just breathe. Worth it, he whispered. You're always worth it. You stupid, stupid man. Michelle's tears fell onto his face. Why would you do that? Why would you risk your life for me? Because I love you. Because I'll always love you. Because I'd rather die protecting you than live knowing I failed you again. The ambulance arrived in a wail of sirens. Paramedics pulled Michelle away from Matt, loaded him onto a stretcher, started working on him with professional efficiency. Michelle tried to follow, but they made her stay behind while they rushed him to the hospital. She stood in the parking lot, covered in his blood, shaking so hard she couldn't make her hands work to unlock her car. Security drove her to the hospital. She didn't remember the ride, didn't remember walking through the emergency room doors, didn't remember anything except the terror that Matt was going to die, and the last thing she'd said to him in that parking lot weeks ago was that he'd never get another chance. The waiting room was sterile and cold and endless. Michelle paced, unable to sit, unable to stop moving, unable to stop replaying the moment when that knife had opened Matt's skin and his blood had started flowing. He'd fought for her. Finally, desperately, without hesitation or fear, he'd fought for her. And it might have cost him his life. A surgeon emerged after what felt like centuries. Are you here for Matthew Hampton? Yes. Is he alive? Please tell me he's alive. He's alive. Critical but stable. The knife wound required surgery. It missed major organs but caused significant blood loss. He also has 2 cracked ribs and severe bruising, but he's going to survive. Michelle's knees gave out. She sat down hard on a waiting room chair and put her head between her knees, breathing through the wave of relief and residual terror. Can I see him? He's in recovery. Once he's moved to a room you can visit. Are you family? Michelle stopped, not sure how to answer. I'm the person he saved tonight. The surgeon's expression softened. He's lucky you care enough to be here. He mentioned your name several times before surgery. Said to tell Michelle he was sorry, that he'd do it all again. Michelle waited until they moved Matt to a room, then slipped inside despite visiting hours being over. The nurse took one look at her blood-stained clothes and let her pass without comment. Matt was unconscious, hooked up to machines that beeped steadily, his torso wrapped in bandages. He looked vulnerable and breakable, and nothing like the polished man who'd sat silent at his parents' dinner table while they destroyed her. This was different. This was the man she'd fallen in love with, the one she'd believed existed under all the family pressure and expectation. This was Matt at his most essential, brave and selfless and real. Michelle pulled a chair beside his bed and took his hand carefully, avoiding the IV line. His skin was warm, his pulse steady under her fingers. You can't do this to me, she whispered. You can't almost die defending me. You can't make me fall in love with you all over again. But it was too late. Watching him fight for her tonight, seeing him bleed for her, knowing he'd chosen her protection over his own safety, it had broken something open inside her chest. The anger was still there, the hurt was still real, but it was complicated now, tangled up with gratitude and terror and the horrible realization that she'd never actually stopped loving him. She'd just stopped trusting him, and tonight, covered in his blood, watching him sacrifice himself without hesitation, that trust had started rebuilding itself one desperate heartbeat at a time. Matt's eyes fluttered open around dawn. He was disoriented, groggy from medication, but when he saw Michelle sitting beside his bed, still holding his hand, still wearing his blood, his face transformed. You're here. Where else would I be? I don't know. Anywhere but here, with the man who broke your heart, who doesn't deserve your time, who... Matt. Michelle squeezed his hand gently. Shut up. He shut up. You saved my life tonight. You fought 3 armed men. You got stabbed. You could have died. But you're okay. That's all that matters. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, you matter too. Your life matters. Your safety matters. You can't just throw yourself in front of danger because you feel guilty about the past. I didn't do it because of guilt, Matt said. his voice stronger now despite the pain medication. I did it because the thought of anything happening to you is unbearable. Because I love you, Michelle. I've loved you since the moment you laughed at my terrible coffee order, and I will love you until the day I die, whether you ever forgive me or not. Michelle felt tears sliding down her face. You can't say things like that. Why not? It's true. Because I'm trying very hard to stay angry at you. I'm trying to protect myself. I'm trying not to get hurt again, and you keep making that impossible. Matt's thumb moved against her palm, a tiny gesture that felt enormous. I'm not asking you to stop being angry. I'm not asking you to forgive me or trust me or give me another chance. I'm just telling you the truth. You deserve truth, even when it's messy and complicated and unwanted. You're an idiot. I know. You could have died. I know. And I would have spent the rest of my life knowing the last thing I said to you was cruel. It wasn't cruel. It was honest. I'd rather have your honest anger than false politeness any day. Michelle laughed through her tears, a sound that was half sob. Why do you have to be like this? Why couldn't you have been like this that night at your parents' house? Because I was weak then, and loving you, losing you, taught me what strength actually looks like. It looks like you, Michelle, standing up for yourself, refusing to accept less than you deserve, walking away when I failed you. That's real strength. I'm still learning. A nurse came in to check Matt's vitals, saw Michelle, and raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. When she left, Michelle stood to go. Stay, Matt said. Please. I know I don't have the right to ask, but I slept better in the past 5 minutes knowing you were here than I have in months. Just stay until morning, then you can leave, and I won't bother you again. Michelle should have said no. Should have protected herself. Should have walked out that door and never looked back. Instead, she settled back into the chair, still holding his hand, and watched him fall asleep with a small smile on his face. She'd deal with what it all meant later. Right now, she was just grateful he was alive. Chapter 7. The Slow Thaw. Michelle didn't forgive Matt, not immediately, not completely, but she stopped running. 3 days after the attack, she visited him in his apartment while he recovered. The place was a shock, tiny, sparse, nothing like the luxury he'd grown up with. But it was clean and organized, with photos of the kids from the center on his fridge and textbooks about youth development on his desk. You actually live here, Michelle said, looking around. Where else would I live? I don't know. I guess I assumed you'd eventually go back to your parents, that this whole thing was temporary. Matt looked at her from his position on the couch, where he was supposed to be resting. This isn't temporary. This is my life now, and I'm happier in this shoebox than I ever was in that mansion. They fell into an uneasy routine. Michelle would stop by after work, ostensibly to check on his recovery, but really because she couldn't stay away. They'd talk, carefully at first, avoiding the minefield of their past, focusing on safe topics like work and the kids at the center, but gradually the conversations deepened. One evening, Matt told her about his childhood. I don't think my parents ever actually saw me. They saw their heir, their investment, the person who would carry on the Hampton name. But Matt, the actual kid who liked dinosaurs and hated piano lessons and just wanted someone to ask about his day, he was invisible. That must have been lonely. It was. And then I met you, and for the first time in my life, someone was interested in me. Not my family or my money or what I could do for them, just me. The person I was when all the other stuff was stripped away. His voice cracked. And I betrayed that. I betrayed you. I chose the people who'd never actually seen me over the one person who did. Michelle sat beside him, close enough to touch, but not touching. Why didn't you fight for me that night? Because I was terrified. Terrified of disappointing them. Terrified of losing their approval. Terrified of being cut off and having to figure out who I was without the safety net of family wealth. I chose comfort over courage, and it cost me everything that actually mattered. And now? Now I know that being uncomfortable is where growth happens. That disappointing people who measure your worth in dollars is a badge of honor. That figuring out who you are without a safety net is terrifying and liberating and absolutely necessary. Michelle studied his face, looking for lies or performance. She found only honesty. You've changed. I'm trying to. Every day I'm trying to become the man you believed I could be. Not to win you back. I don't think I'll ever deserve that chance again. But because you showed me a better version of myself, and I can't unsee it now. Don't do that. Do what? Don't make your growth about me. This has to be about you, for you. Otherwise, you're just replacing one set of expectations with another. Matt nodded slowly. You're right. I'm sorry. I guess I'm still learning how to be selfish in healthy ways. They shared a pizza that evening, sitting on his couch, and Michelle told him things she'd never shared before. About her parents' death, about inheriting wealth too young, about the loneliness of never knowing who wanted her versus her money. That's why you lived so modestly, Matt said, understanding dawning. You were testing people, seeing who would stick around when there was nothing obvious to gain. I wasn't testing anyone. I just wanted to be myself. Michelle. Not Michelle Brown, heir to a fortune. Just Michelle, who likes reading to kids and trying new restaurants and laughing at terrible jokes. And I failed the test by not defending you when my parents assumed you were poor. You didn't fail a test, Matt. You failed me. There's a difference. The words hurt, but they were true, and Matt accepted them. Over the following weeks, they continued spending time together. Not dating, Michelle was clear about that, but not strangers either, something in between, undefined and complicated. They walked through the park where they'd had their first date. Matt stopped at the bench where he'd first kissed her. I need to tell you something, he said. That night at my parents' house, when I asked you to just sign the prenup, I wasn't thinking about protecting their assets. I was thinking about keeping the peace, about making the conflict go away so we could get back to being happy. I genuinely believed that signing a piece of paper didn't matter if we loved each other. But it did matter. It mattered more than anything, because that piece of paper represented how they saw you. And by asking you to sign it, I was agreeing with their assessment. I was saying your dignity was less important than my comfort. Michelle sat down on the bench, and Matt sat beside her, leaving space between them. Do you know what hurt the most? It wasn't the prenup. It wasn't your parents' cruelty. It was your silence, your willingness to let them say those things without defending me. In that moment, I realized I was alone, that the person I thought would stand beside me was actually just standing nearby. I know. And I'm so sorry, Michelle. I'm sorry I made you feel alone when you should have felt cherished and protected and defended. I'm sorry I prioritized my parents' feelings over yours. I'm sorry I was weak when you needed me to be strong. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve to know that I understand what I did, that I've thought about it every single day since you drove away, that I don't want your forgiveness because I haven't earned it, but I want you to know that your pain didn't go unnoticed, that I see it, and I'm sorry for causing it, and I'm trying to become someone who would never cause it again. Michelle turned to him, and her eyes were full of tears she refused to let fall. I'm terrified of trusting you again, Matt. Terrified of opening up my heart and having you choose wrong again. Terrified of being that vulnerable with someone who's already hurt me. Then don't trust me yet. Just let me show you. Through my actions, not my words. Let me prove that I've changed, that I'm learning, that I'm becoming someone worthy of the love you gave me. And if I can't, if the hurt is too deep, then I'll respect that. I'll step back. I'll let you go completely, but I'm hoping, I'm praying, that you'll give me the chance to earn back what I destroyed. Michelle stood and Matt stood with her. They walked back to her car in silence, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on them. I'm not ready to jump back in, Michelle said finally. I'm not ready to pretend everything is fine or that love conquers all or any of that romantic bullshit. I'm not asking you to. But I'm also not ready to walk away completely. So maybe we just keep doing this. Talking, spending time together, seeing if trust can rebuild itself slowly. I'll take whatever you're willing to give me, Michelle, and I'll try my hardest not to screw it up again. She smiled, small and sad but real. You better not, because next time I won't give you a third chance. There won't need to be a next time, I promise you that. Michelle drove away, and Matt watched her go with hope flickering in his chest for the first time since she'd driven away from his parents' estate all those weeks ago. Maybe they wouldn't get their happy ending. Maybe the damage was too deep to fully repair. But maybe, just maybe, they could build something new from the ashes of what they'd destroyed. Something stronger. Something earned. Something real. Chapter 8. The Reckoning Witnessed. Richard and Diane Hampton discovered Matt and Michelle were spending time together through the worst possible source, a society gossip column that ran a photo of them having coffee together. The headline read, "Hampton heir and mystery heiress reunite after dramatic split." Diane called Matt immediately. He let it go to voicemail. She called again and again. Finally, Matt answered, "What do you want, Mother?" "I want to know if you've lost your mind. You're seeing her again? After everything she did to this family?" "Everything she did." Matt's laugh was bitter. "She terminated business contracts. That's what she did. You destroyed a relationship. There's a difference. We're facing bankruptcy, Matthew. Real, actual bankruptcy. And you're having coffee with the woman who's destroying us?" "No, I'm having coffee with the woman you drove away. Your financial problems are the consequences of your own cruelty. Michelle didn't create this situation. You did. She's manipulating you. Can't you see that? She's using you to get revenge on us. She's not using me for anything. We're friends, or trying to be friends, and my relationship with her is none of your business." "It absolutely is our business." When Matt hung up, Diane called back. He blocked her number, but Diane was nothing if not persistent. She showed up at Michelle's office building during business hours, and this time she brought her rage into the marble lobby where everyone could witness it. "Michelle Brown!" Her voice echoed off the expensive surfaces. "I know you're in here. Come down here and face me like a woman instead of hiding behind your money." Security moved to intercept her, but Michelle's assistant called up with barely suppressed glee. "Miss Brown, there's a situation in the lobby you might want to see." Michelle pulled up the security camera feed on her computer and watched Diane create a scene. Part of her wanted to have security escort her out. But another part, the part that was tired of hiding, tired of being polite, tired of letting rich people get away with cruelty because they had nice clothes and practiced smiles, decided it was time to end this once and for all. She descended the grand staircase in a power suit that cost more than Diane's car, every inch the queen of her empire. Employees and visitors had gathered to watch. Security cameras captured everything. Someone was definitely recording on their phone. "Mrs. Hampton," Michelle said, her voice carrying across the lobby with perfect clarity. "What seems to be the problem?" "You," Diane pointed a shaking finger. "You destroyed our family. You manipulated our son. You're a vindictive witch who can't accept that you're not good enough for a Hampton." The lobby was silent except for Diane's heavy breathing. Michelle descended the last few steps and stopped at a distance that made Diane have to look up at her. "Let me make sure I understand correctly," Michelle said, her voice dangerously calm. "You're upset because I refused to sign a prenuptial agreement that labeled me a gold digger. You're upset because I walked away from a man who wouldn't defend me. You're upset because I terminated business contracts that were mine to terminate. Is that correct? You've destroyed everything we've built." "No, Mrs. Hampton, I haven't destroyed anything. You did that yourself. You destroyed your relationship with your son the moment you decided your money mattered more than his happiness. You destroyed your company the moment you made enemies of people who could have been allies. You destroyed your reputation the moment you treated kindness like weakness and love like a business transaction. How dare you?" "I'm not finished," Michelle's voice cut like a blade. "You want to know what I am? I'm a woman who loved your son with her whole heart while asking for nothing in return. I'm a person who tried for 2 years to earn your respect, even though I didn't need it. I'm someone who could have bought Hampton Industries 3 times over, but chose to live modestly because character matters more than appearance." Diane's face went pale. "This building," Michelle gestured around them, "I own it. The company your husband is currently begging for a loan from? Mine. The charity that rejected your donation because you tried to use philanthropy as reputation management? Also mine. I don't need your approval, Mrs. Hampton. I never did. But Matt needed your love, and you gave him conditions instead. Michelle moved closer, and her next words were quiet enough that everyone had to strain to hear. That's why you're here screaming in my lobby while your world burns down. Not because of me, because of you. Because you valued money over your son. Because you measured worth in dollars instead of character. Because when you had a chance to welcome someone genuine into your family, you chose cruelty instead. You can't talk to me like this. I can, and I am. You came to my building. You made a scene in front of my employees. You called me names and made accusations. So now you get to hear the truth. Your family is suffering not because I'm vindictive, but because actions have consequences. You treated me like garbage, and I responded by removing myself and my resources from your life. That's not revenge, that's self-respect. Someone in the crowd started clapping. Then someone else joined. Within seconds, the entire lobby was applauding, and Diane stood there, red-faced and humiliated as her tantrum was met with public support for the woman she'd come to condemn. "You'll regret this," Diane said, her voice shaking. "The only thing I regret is wasting 2 years trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it freely. Now please leave my building. Security will escort you out." 2 guards moved forward. Diane looked around at the watching faces, employees, visitors, people recording on their phones, and whatever fight she had left drained out of her. She turned and walked toward the doors, her designer heels clicking against the marble, her dignity in tatters. Michelle watched her go, feeling no triumph, no victory, just exhaustion and sadness that it had come to this. The video was online within an hour. By evening, it had millions of views. News outlets picked it up. Social media exploded with takes, most of them condemning the Hamptons and praising Michelle for her composure and devastating takedown. Matt saw the video at the community center, someone showing it to him on their phone with barely contained glee. He watched Michelle defend herself, watched his mother's public humiliation, and felt a complicated mix of emotions. He called Michelle immediately. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Are you?" "That's my mother you just eviscerated in front of the entire internet. She came to my workplace and caused a scene. I responded appropriately. I know, and she deserved it. Every word you said was true." Matt paused. "But she's still my mother, and watching her humiliated like that is hard, even though I know she brought it on herself." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. You were defending yourself, standing up for yourself, being strong in a way I should have been strong for you. I'm proud of you, Michelle, and I'm sorry my family has put you through all of this." That evening, Matt drove to his parents' house for the first time since moving out. He found them in the study, Diane crying, Richard staring at nothing. "I saw the video," Matt said from the doorway. "She humiliated me," Diane sobbed. "In front of everyone. She destroyed what little reputation we have left." "No, Mom, you destroyed your own reputation. Michelle just refused to be your victim anymore." "So you're on her side." "I'm not on anyone's side. I'm just trying to get you to understand that this situation is your creation. You treated her terribly. You insulted her, accused her, tried to force her into a humiliating contract. And when she defended herself, you acted like she was the villain. Can't you see how backwards that is?" Richard finally looked at his son. "We were trying to protect you." "From what? From love? From someone who saw me as a person instead of a paycheck? From the first real relationship I'd ever had?" Matt sat down, suddenly exhausted. "I need you to understand something. What happened between Michelle and me, the way I failed her, the way I'm trying to earn her trust back, that's between us. But what happened between you and her, that's different. You owe her an apology, a real one. Not because you're sorry she turned out to be rich, but because you're sorry you were cruel." "We can't apologize now," Diane said. "Not after that video. She made fools of us." "She defended herself. There's a difference. And if you can't see that, if you can't take responsibility for your own actions, then I don't know what else to say to you." Matt stood to leave, but Richard's voice stopped him. What do you want from us, son? I want you to be better, to value people over money, to measure worth in character instead of bank accounts, to be parents who love conditionally instead of strategically. Matt's voice broke. I want you to be people I can respect, but I don't know if that's possible anymore. He left them sitting in their study, facing the consequences of their choices, wondering if redemption was even possible for people who'd spent so long believing their own press. Some wounds cut too deep. Some mistakes couldn't be undone. Some families broke under the weight of their own toxicity. Matt was finally accepting that his family might be one of them. Chapter 9. The Real Fight. Matt arrived at Riverside Community Center on a Tuesday morning to find the staff in crisis mode and the kids crying. What happened? He asked Jasmine, the director, who looked like she'd been up all night. We're being shut down. Effective immediately, the building's been sold to Summit Development Group. They're tearing it down to build luxury condos. We have 30 days to vacate. Her voice cracked. Matt, we serve 300 kids. Where are they supposed to go? Matt felt something cold settle in his chest. That can't be legal. We have a lease. We have programs running. Our lease was with the previous owner. The new owners invoked a development clause. Their lawyers say it's ironclad. Jasmine handed him a stack of documents. I've been trying to understand these since yesterday. I don't know what half of it means. Matt took the papers, and his hands went cold. He recognized the letterhead. Summit Development Group was one of his father's old associates, the kind of people who measured success in demolished buildings and displaced communities. Let me look at this, Matt said. Don't tell the kids yet, not until we know what we're actually dealing with. He spent the next 6 hours reading every word of the lease, the sale agreement, the development permits. His business training, the education he'd resented, the skills he'd thought were worthless, suddenly became weapons he could use for something that actually mattered. By evening, he'd found 3 potential violations in the development permits and 1 crucial loophole in the lease termination clause. It wasn't much, but it was a starting point. We can fight this, he told Jasmine, but it's going to take time and money and probably lawyers we can't afford. Then we're finished. No, we're not. Matt pulled out his phone. I know people who owe me favors. Let me make some calls. What he didn't know was that Michelle was on the board of the foundation that anonymously funded Riverside. She'd been in an emergency meeting all afternoon, trying to find legal options, when her assistant mentioned that Matt Hampton had been at the center all day, poring over documents, making calls, refusing to leave. He's still there? Michelle asked. According to our contact, he's been there since morning. Hasn't eaten. Told the staff he's not leaving until he finds a way to save the center. Michelle felt something shift in her chest. I need to go. To the center, but if he sees you, I don't care. This is more important. She arrived at Riverside after dark to find Matt in the small office, surrounded by papers, on his 3rd conference call with a lawyer friend who was walking him through zoning regulations. He looked exhausted, his shirt rumpled, his hair standing on end from running his hands through it. Michelle stood in the doorway, listening. No, I understand the precedent, Matt was saying, his voice hoarse. But there has to be something. These kids, they don't have other options. This center is the only safe place some of them have after school. If we lose this, we lose them to streets and gangs and futures that shouldn't be their only choice. He paused, listening. I don't care if it's a long shot. I don't care if it takes months. These kids are worth fighting for. Another pause. Yeah, I know I can't pay you, but I'm asking anyway, because this is the right thing to do, and I'm hoping that still matters to someone. He hung up and dropped his head into his hands. That's when he noticed Michelle standing there. How long have you been there? Long enough. Michelle stepped into the office. I know about the development group. I know what they're trying to do. Then you know we're probably going to lose. The lease termination is legal even if it's morally bankrupt. The permits were approved. The council won't intervene because Summit has connections. We're fighting a system designed to protect people exactly like them. People exactly like your father used to be. Matt looked at her and his expression was raw. Yeah, people exactly like I would have become if I'd stayed in that world. This is what my family did, Michelle. They bought buildings, displaced communities, built luxury housing that pushed out the people who actually needed help. And I was being groomed to do the same thing. But you're not doing that, you're fighting it. I'm trying to fight it, but I don't know if trying is enough. He gestured at the papers covering the desk. I've been at this for hours. I found some minor permit violations, a possible loophole in the lease, a few allies who might testify at a hearing. But Summit has lawyers and money and time. We have me, reading documents I barely understand, making calls to friends who can't really help. Michelle sat down across from him. Why are you doing this? What do you mean? You could walk away. This isn't your fight. You're just an employee here. You could find another job, another center, another cause. Why are you sitting here at midnight fighting a battle you'll probably lose for kids who aren't your responsibility? Matt looked at her like the answer was obvious. Because they matter. Because Deshaun comes here every day to escape his abusive stepfather. Because little Aisha learned to read in our tutoring program. Because the Rodriguez twins have a safe place to be while their single mom works double shifts. Because these kids deserve someone to fight for them, even when the fight seems impossible. Even when you gain nothing from it? I'm not doing this to gain something, Michelle. I'm doing it because it's right. Because for the first time in my life, I'm using the skills and knowledge I have for something that actually matters. Because watching these kids lose their safe space would destroy something in me that I'm just starting to rebuild. Michelle felt tears threatening. This was the proof she'd been waiting for. Not grand gestures or dramatic rescues, but Matt choosing to fight the right battle for the right reasons, without expecting reward or recognition. What if I told you there's a way to win? Matt's head snapped up. What? The foundation that funds this center. I'm on the board. We've been looking for legal options all day. We have lawyers, resources, connections, but we were missing something. What? Someone on the inside. Someone who understands their tactics because he was trained by people exactly like them. Someone who knows how to fight in their world, using their weapons. Michelle leaned forward. You found violations in 6 hours that our lawyers missed in 6 months. You understand how Summit thinks because you were raised to think that way. You're the piece we've been missing. I don't understand. Why didn't the Foundation step in immediately? Because we were trying to find a legal solution, a clean one. But you've shown us something different, that sometimes you have to get in the trenches and fight dirty, use every loophole and technicality and connection you have. You've been doing that all day without knowing anyone would notice or care. Matt stared at her. You're the anonymous donor. You've been funding Riverside all along. My family trust has, yes. And you've been watching me today. I have. Testing me? No, Matt. I've been watching you be yourself. The man you've become without your family's money and influence. The man who chooses to fight for people who can't fight for themselves. The man I fell in love with, finally living up to his potential. Matt stood, started pacing. I can't take your money. I can't use your resources to save this place. That's too easy. That's letting someone else solve the problem. I'm not offering to solve it for you. I'm offering to fight beside you, to combine what I have with what you know, to build something together that neither of us could build alone. Why? Because this is what partnership looks like. Not one person saving the other, not grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices, just two people using their strengths to protect something they both care about. Matt sat back down, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. Say you'll work with me. Starting now. We have 30 days to stop this development, save this center, and protect these kids. Are you in? Of course I'm in. But Michelle, this could take everything. Late nights, legal battles, facing down my father's old associates. Summit won't back down easily. I know, and I'm not afraid of the fight, are you? Matt looked at this woman who'd been hurt by his cowardice, who'd watched him rebuild himself piece by piece, who was now offering him a chance to prove his transformation was real and lasting. No, I'm not afraid. Not anymore. They worked through the night, combining Michelle's legal resources with Matt's insider knowledge. By dawn, they had a strategy: challenge the permits based on the violations Matt found, invoke the lease loophole he'd discovered, and file for an emergency injunction to stop the demolition. But more than that, they had something neither had possessed before: true partnership. Not Matt protecting Michelle, not Michelle rescuing Matt, but two equals fighting side by side for something bigger than themselves. Over the next week, they barely slept. Matt coordinated with lawyers Michelle's foundation hired, preparing testimony and documentation. Michelle used her connections to pressure city council members and media contacts. They tag-teamed meetings, strategized over late-night coffee, argued about tactics, and compromised on solutions. The kids at the center watched them work, and Deshawn pulled Matt aside one afternoon. "Coach Matt, is Miss Michelle your girlfriend?" Matt looked across the room where Michelle was organizing community letters of support. "It's complicated. Looks simple to me. You look at her the way my mum looks at her new boyfriend, like she's the best thing that ever happened." "She is the best thing that ever happened. I just don't know if I deserve a second chance with her." "My mum says second chances are for people who learn from their mistakes. You learned, Coach. I can see it." Matt ruffled Deshawn's hair. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm 15. I know everything." The hearing was set for the following week. Summit Development brought 3 lawyers and a portfolio of approved permits. Matt and Michelle brought evidence, community testimony, and righteous anger. Matt took the stand to explain the permit violations, using his business knowledge to systematically dismantle Summit's claims. Michelle presented evidence of the community need, the center's impact, the devastating consequences of closure. But the moment that changed everything was when Matt was cross-examined by Summit's lead attorney, a man who'd worked with Richard Hampton for decades. "Mr. Hampton, isn't it true that you personally benefited from similar development projects, that your family built their fortune on exactly this type of urban renewal?" "Yes, that's true." "And now you're opposing it. Isn't that hypocritical?" "No. It's called growth, learning, becoming someone better than you were." Matt looked directly at the attorney. "I was raised to see buildings and profit margins. I was taught that development meant progress, regardless of who it displaced. But I was wrong. My family was wrong, and this development is wrong. These kids matter more than your luxury condos. This community matters more than your profit margins, and I will fight you with every skill my family taught me, using their own weapons against them, because this is the right thing to do." The room went silent. Even Summit's lawyers looked uncomfortable. The judge ruled in their favor. Emergency injunction granted, permits suspended pending full investigation of violations, development halted indefinitely. When they left the courthouse, the Riverside staff was waiting. Jasmine was crying, the kids were cheering. Deshawn ran up and hugged Matt so hard he nearly fell over. "You saved us, Coach." "We saved you," Matt corrected, looking at Michelle. "All of us together." That night, they sat on the courthouse steps after everyone else had left, exhausted and triumphant, and fundamentally changed by the battle they'd fought together. "Thank you," Matt said quietly, "for believing I could do this, for fighting beside me, for giving me the chance to prove I've changed." "You proved that the first day," Michelle said, "when you spent 6 hours reading documents without knowing if anyone would notice or care. When you made calls to lawyers you couldn't pay because the kids were worth fighting for. When you chose to stand in the trenches instead of walking away." "I almost walked away. When I first saw those papers, my first instinct was to think it was impossible. Too big, too hard, too much for someone like me to fix." "But you didn't walk away." "No, because you taught me that impossible just means it hasn't been done yet. That fights worth fighting are usually the hardest ones, that who you are is determined by what you do when everything is at stake." Michelle turned to face him fully. "Matt, I need to tell you something. I'm listening. I've been afraid of trusting you again, afraid that under pressure you'd choose wrong, that you'd revert to who you were that night at your parents' house. But watching you this week, seeing you fight not with grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices, but with sustained effort and unwavering principle. I finally understand that you've actually changed. Not because you're performing for me, but because you're genuinely different. I am different. Losing you destroyed me, but it also freed me to become someone worth being. I'm not afraid anymore, Michelle said, and her voice was steady, certain. I'm not afraid of trusting you. I'm not afraid of building a future together. I'm not afraid of love, even after everything. Because you've proven that love isn't about never failing. It's about who you become after you fail. Matt's eyes filled with tears. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying ask me again. Ask you what? What you asked me in that hospital room. When I told you to ask again when you'd earned it. Michelle smiled. You've earned it, Matt. Matt slid off the step, down onto one knee on the courthouse steps, and took her hands. Michelle Brown, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me? Will you fight beside me and let me fight beside you? Will you trust me with your heart, knowing I'll protect it with everything I am? Yes, Michelle said, pulling him up and kissing him. Yes to all of it. They sat there on the courthouse steps as the sun set, wrapped in each other's arms, knowing they'd won more than a legal battle. They'd won trust. They'd won partnership. They'd won the kind of love that's built not on perfection, but on the hard work of becoming better together. When? Matt asked. Soon. I don't want to wait anymore. We've waited long enough. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. You fought for those kids like I've always dreamed someone would fight for me. You used your privilege and knowledge and skills to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. You stood up to your father's world and said, no, this isn't who I am anymore. That's the man I want to marry. Matt kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I love you, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that this, us, fighting together, building something that matters, is exactly who I am now. I know you will. That's why I said yes. As they walked to their cars, hand in hand, Matt realized something profound. He'd spent his whole life trying to be impressive, the perfect son, the successful businessman, the wealthy heir. But the moment he'd actually earned Michelle's trust wasn't when he was impressive. It was when he was useful, when he fought for kids who couldn't fight for themselves, when he used what he knew for people who needed it. That was the man Michelle loved. And that was exactly who he wanted to be. Chapter 10. The Wedding. 3 months later, Michelle planned a wedding that looked nothing like the grand affair she'd originally imagined. The venue was a lakeside garden, intimate and beautiful, with room for 75 guests. No society photographers, no press releases, no performance for people who measured worth in spectacle. Just family, the chosen kind, not just the biological, and friends who'd supported them through everything. The guest list included kids from Riverside Community Center, staff who'd become family, Michelle's college roommate who'd held her through countless crying sessions, Matt's friend who'd let him crash on his couch during the worst of it, and, after much deliberation, Michelle sent an invitation to Richard and Diane Hampton with a handwritten note. If you want to witness your son's happiness, you're welcome. But you come as guests, seeking forgiveness, not parents demanding respect. Your presence is a privilege, not a right. The morning of the wedding, Michelle stood in a simple white dress that didn't need embellishment or drama. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone who'd survived heartbreak and betrayal and come out stronger. Kendra zipped her up. You ready for this? I'm terrified. Good, that means it matters. What if he changes his mind? What if his parents convince him I'm not good enough? What if, Michelle... Kendra turned her around. That man ran into a burning car for strangers. He fought 3 armed men to protect you. He gave up everything his family represented to become someone worthy of your love. He's not changing his mind. Michelle took a shaky breath. I know. I just keep waiting for something to go wrong. For the other shoe to drop. For the universe to remind me that happy endings don't really happen. Maybe they do. Maybe you've earned this one." Meanwhile, in a small room on the other side of the venue, Matt stood in front of a mirror adjusting his tie. His hands still bore faint scars from the car rescue. His arms had burn marks that would never fully fade, but he'd never felt more whole. His friend Jake clapped him on the shoulder. "You good?" "I'm marrying Michelle Brown. I'm better than good. I'm the luckiest man alive." Even after everything, the breakup, the estrangement, the near-death experiences, especially after everything. Because all of that taught me what actually matters, who I actually am when everything else is stripped away. There was a knock on the door. Matt opened it to find his parents standing there, looking older and smaller than he remembered. "Hi, son," Richard said quietly. "We weren't sure if we should come." "But Michelle invited us," Diane added quickly. "And we wanted to be here, if you'll have us." Matt looked at them, really looked at them, and saw people who'd spent months facing the consequences of their choices. The bankruptcy had finally come. The estate was gone. The company was dissolved. They'd lost everything they'd valued most, and in that loss, they'd started to understand what actually mattered. "There are conditions," Matt said. "Anything," Richard said. "Name them. You're here as guests, not parents. You don't get special treatment or recognition. You sit in the back. You don't make this day about your redemption or your feelings. This is about Michelle and me. Understood?" "Understood," they said in unison. "And before the ceremony, you're going to apologize to Michelle. A real apology. Not because you misjudged her wealth, but because you were cruel to someone who deserved kindness." "We want to do that," Diane said. "We've been wanting to do that for months. We just didn't think she'd let us." "She might not, but you're going to try anyway." Matt led them to Michelle's prep room. She was standing by the window, radiant in her simple dress, and when she saw the Hamptons, her expression cycled through shock, anger, and finally cautious neutrality. "I'll give you 5 minutes," she said. "Matt, stay." Richard and Diane approached like supplicants before a queen. Diane spoke first, her voice shaking. "Michelle, I don't know how to apologize for what I did to you, what I said to you, how I treated you. I was so consumed with protecting what we had that I couldn't see I was destroying something infinitely more valuable, my son's happiness and the chance to welcome someone extraordinary into our family." "You didn't take our son from us," Richard added. "You showed him who he could be. You loved him better than we ever did, and instead of being grateful for that, we punished you for it." Michelle's expression didn't soften. "You called me a gold digger. You accused me of hunting your son for money. You forced me into a situation where I had to defend my dignity and self-worth while the man I loved sat silent. Do you understand what that did to me?" "We do," Diane said, tears streaming down her face. "And we don't expect forgiveness. We just needed you to know that we were catastrophically wrong. About you, about what matters, about everything. You are extraordinary, Michelle, and our son became extraordinary by loving you." Michelle looked at Matt, who nodded slightly, giving her permission to do whatever she needed to do. "I forgive you," she said finally. "Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger would poison the life Matt and I are building. You can stay for the wedding. You can witness our happiness. But our relationship, yours and mine, will take time to rebuild, if it ever does. And that's my choice to make, not yours." "Thank you," Richard said. "That's more grace than we've earned." "You're right, it is." The ceremony began as the sun started its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in colors that looked like they'd been designed for this exact moment. Michelle walked herself down the aisle, no father to give her away, because she was giving herself to this moment, this choice, this future. Matt watched her approach, and the love in his expression made several guests start crying before the vows even began. They'd written their own vows, because traditional words couldn't capture what they'd survived to get here. Matt went first, his voice strong and clear. "Michelle, you've seen me at my worst, a coward who chose comfort over courage. You could have walked away forever, and no one would have blamed you. Instead, you gave me the chance to become the man you always believed I could be. You taught me that love isn't about pretty words or easy moments. It's about choosing someone even when they've hurt you, believing in someone even when they've failed you, fighting for a future together even when the past is full of pain." His voice broke, but he continued, "You are my redemption and my home. You're the best person I've ever known, and I will spend the rest of my life earning the trust you're giving me today. I choose you, every single day, for the rest of my life. I choose you." Michelle's turn. She took a shaky breath, and when she spoke, her voice carried across the garden like a bell. "Matthew, you bled for me. You burned for me. You lost everything and found yourself. You're not the man I fell in love with. You're better. You're braver, stronger, more certain of who you are and what you stand for. You've proven that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice we make every day, a commitment we honor through actions, not just words." She reached for his hands, holding them carefully, mindfully. "I've been afraid of trusting you again, afraid of getting hurt, afraid that history would repeat itself. But love requires courage, and you've taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to move forward despite it. So I choose you, Matthew Hampton. I choose to build a life with you. I choose to believe in us. Every single day I choose you." The officiant pronounced them married, and when Matt kissed Michelle, the entire garden erupted in applause and cheers. The kids from Riverside were loudest, shouting and whistling. At the reception, Richard and Diane approached the couple together, and Richard's voice cracked when he spoke. "We were wrong about everything, especially her. She didn't take our son, she gave him back to himself." "Thank you for saying that," Matt said. "But you need to understand something. Michelle and we're building a life that's ours, not an extension of your family, not a continuation of your legacy, ours. And whether you're part of that life is something we'll decide together, based on your actions, not your words." "We understand," Diane said, "and we'll spend however long it takes proving that we've learned, that we're better, that we value people over money and character over status." Michelle stepped forward, surprising everyone, including herself. "Everyone deserves a second chance to do better. You hurt me deeply. You treated me terribly. But you also raised the man I love, and somewhere in your DNA is the potential he's realized. So we'll see. We'll take it slow. We'll see if you can learn to be the parents and in-laws you should have been from the start." "That's more than we deserve," Richard said. "I know," Michelle replied, but she smiled slightly. "Consider it a wedding gift." As the sun set, Matt and Michelle danced alone while their guests watched. The DJ played a song they'd chosen together, and they moved in perfect synchronicity, like they'd been doing this forever. Matt leaned down to whisper in her ear, "Was I worth the wait?" Michelle pulled back to look at him, this man who'd broken her heart and then rebuilt himself piece by piece to earn it back. This man who'd fought for her, bled for her, become his best self for her. "You were worth everything," she said, "even the pain, especially the pain. It taught us both who we really are." And who are we? We're survivors. We're fighters. We're people who choose love even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. We're the couple who broke and healed and came back stronger. Matt kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love you, Mrs. Hampton. I love you too. But I'm keeping Brown as my last name, just so we're clear." He laughed, full and genuine. "I'd expect nothing less." They danced as stars appeared overhead and fireflies began their nightly dance around the garden. Their guests watched with tears in their eyes, seeing not just a wedding, but a resurrection. Two people who'd lost everything finding each other again and building something unbreakable from the ruins. It wasn't the fairy tale Michelle had imagined when they'd first gotten engaged. It was better, because it was real, earned, tested by fire and blood and heartbreak and choice. Some love stories were easy, theirs wasn't, but it was true. And in the end, truth mattered more than easy. As the night stretched on and the celebration continued, Michelle found herself standing at the edge of the water, looking out at the lake reflecting stars. Matt found her there, wrapped his arms around her from behind, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "Happy?" he asked. "Completely." No regrets? Only one. He tensed. What's that? That we didn't get here sooner. That we had to go through all that pain to find this happiness. I don't know, Matt said thoughtfully. I think we had to break to understand how to build something unbreakable. We had to lose each other to realize what we had was worth fighting for. We had to face our worst moments to discover who we are in our best ones. Michelle turned in his arms, looking up at the man she'd chosen, who'd chosen her back. When did you get so wise? I married a brilliant woman. Some of it was bound to rub off. They kissed as fireworks lit up the sky, a surprise from Kendra, who'd insisted every good wedding needed a grand finale. And standing there in Matt's arms, watching colors explode across the darkness, Michelle knew with absolute certainty that they were going to make it. Not because love was easy or because they'd never struggle again, but because they'd learned the most important lesson of all. Love wasn't about never falling. It was about choosing to get back up together, about building something worth protecting, about becoming people worthy of each other, day after day, choice after choice, for the rest of their lives. And that was exactly what they'd do.